Okay, here we go. So, welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. My name is Lindsay Valsina here at Scrum.org. And today we have one of our professional Scrum trainers from the US here, Russell Miller, and he is going to talk to us about how to create an initial product vision that sticks and drives alignment. So, a big topic today on product vision, a very important topic in product management and in Scrum. So, let's get started. So, next slide, please, Russell. All right, so before we dive into it, you'll notice that your microphone is muted. That is on purpose. We are going to be collecting questions though through the Q&A. So please utilize the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can enter all your questions in there. There is a chat as well. If you have technical questions or just want to make a comment, utilize that. But we do try to keep the questions for our speakers separate in the Q&A box. So remember that. And then also this session is being recorded and you will get a link for that within 24 hours, as well as the slides will be up as well. So you will get access to all this. So don't worry, you will see this content again. So next slide, please, Russell. Okay, a little bit about Scrum.org. We are the home of Scrum, and we were founded by Ken Schwaber, one of the co-creators of Scrum, back in 2009. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems, and we do so through our professional Scrum training, certification, and lots of ongoing learning opportunities, a lot of free ones right on our website. So please check those out. Obviously, you've already checked them out a little bit if you found this webinar. But there are a lot of great videos. We have a podcast, lots of great content to consume in different ways. So definitely check that out. And today, I hope that this session plays an important role in your learning journey. So with that, I will hand it over to Russell to introduce himself and kick us off about product vision.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. I hope that you might pick up a thing or two or might pick up something you could use to help your colleagues. I reside in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm originally from Tennessee, as if any of you care, except those of you from Tennessee. Mom and Dad sent me to school. I got a degree in mechanical engineering. I enjoy running. I make my living have made my living as an engineer, an agile coach, a project manager, and a program manager, a product manager, product owner, professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org, a Scrum master, and I've made a living in automotive and aerospace design in the past. I'd love to hear from some of you. You can reach me 3 different ways. There's an email address there. You can hit me on LinkedIn if you like. And then I have a page on the Scrum.org site, which you can navigate to through the link below. I'm interested in speaking to you today about a vision, and I'll say vision for a product, but in your mind, you can consider that's a vision for a service or a vision for an offering, but the word I'm going to use is for a product. And we're going to work our way toward what do we mean by vision and how might we create one? And having created one, how do we use it to the benefit of ourselves and our team members and our leaders? And how do we inspect it and how do we adapt it? And how does it drive some of our organizational decisions? You may ask, gosh, Russell, you're going to cover all that in the limited time here. No, this is going to be a bit about how do you create an initial product vision, and then how do you seek alignment on the vision, and how do you maintain that vision, and who should know about it, and how should they know about it, and how frequently should they know about it. And you can think about why, and I'm happy to do a lunch and learn if you like, and we can dive into that more. So one day in 1671, Christopher Wren observed 3 bricklayers on a scaffold, and one was crouched, and one was half standing, another was standing tall. and they're working very hard and very fast. To the first bricklayer, Christopher Wren asked the question, "What are you doing?" To which the bricklayer replied, "I'm a bricklayer. I'm working hard, laying bricks to feed my family." The second bricklayer responded, "I'm a builder. I'm building a wall." But the third bricklayer, the most productive of the three, and the future leader of the group, when asked the question, "What are you doing?" replied with a gleam in his eye, "I'm a cathedral builder, and I'm building a great cathedral to the Almighty." Wow, what would that look like? Great question. It would look like this. This happens to be St. Paul's Cathedral in England. So, to whom does the vision matter? It would matter to those who would fund the product development. So, if we've not funded an enterprise, a product, then it matters to them. Who are we trying to serve? What do they care about? What needs do they have? What needs do they think they have before a decision is made to move forward? I'll use examples looking out into the world, like with commercial products, but that most of my experience has been working internally with organizations that develop products for either internal users or I'll say embedded stakeholders, probably not the right word, but people who are captive to using some of the solutions that we developed. But the same would be true for large operations in which we're trying to serve people who are doing X and Y and Z, even if our efforts are a component of the X and Y and Z. And you think, well, why do we care if we're just building a component? Great question. We might want the vision to matter, expect the vision to matter to those who would examine the budget of the future users. In other words, do the people have the money to afford what we would build? So I'll ask you to pause. You're welcome to chime in if you want, but think of a product that you think is pretty cool, but is too expensive. Have that in your own mind. Now, we're not going to look at expenses. I'm just telling you, somebody's got to decide, do the people we want to provide this service to have the money, or do their buyers, so to speak, have the money? The vision should matter to the leaders who are responsible for building the product. It should matter to the product manager. It should matter to a product owner. It should matter to the Scrum Master. It should matter to the developers. When I say should, I don't mean it already matters. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we, as we create the vision, we need to either gain input from or repopulate to, make aware, make other people aware of what the vision is. The stakeholders in the organization should care. And you say, well, why does a stakeholder care? Because we need a stakeholder to do some things, but they're not doing it for us. They're doing it for this end user who needs support or help or a new feature or some kind of bug resolved. And you can go down the list of the people who are in service to our users. It should matter to the subject matter experts. I mentioned the support personnel. It should matter to the salespeople. Great. Who are we speaking to in this advertisement? It should matter to the advertisers. It should matter to those who support the product. Look, I got support there twice. What's that mean? There's no perfection this side of heaven. And it should matter to you. So I wonder, when we talk about a vision, what are we talking about? When do you create it? That's a good question. What if the development's already started yet? What if it's somebody's already decided to fund something? What if development's already ongoing? What if I'm in a position to support the application once it's already in development or after development? These are I think, good questions, because I've come into a position where um, where I've been in multiple places during the development of a product and have created a vision in those cases for some of the reasons I'm going to explain a little bit here. We care about how the user will make use of the product. We also care what will be different for the user. So you might think to yourself, gosh, what's going to be different for the user? Some of you may remember the ad campaign back in the day when the iPod was launched. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me. Something like have 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so the idea that was being communicated there is that you like songs? Great. You like more than one song? Great. Would you like 1,000 songs at your disposal in your pocket? And so this was different from in days gone by when we had the CD player or a cassette tape player, because each of those contain a limited number of songs, and 1,000 is a big difference. So that's something that would be different for the user. And then the question I care about here, and I think you should care about, is whose help do you need to create the vision? So, and I don't mean market research. I mean, if you're the one crafting the vision or helping someone craft the vision, I've been in the place of helping others craft the vision. And then the question is, who do we need to get involved in that process? It's important to know that what we do is more important than how we do it. I'm a professional I want to tell people how to get things done so that they get good results candidly, so that they're on time and under budget and leave customers happy and leave internal leaders and stakeholders satisfied. That's at a bigger level. Below that, I want our developers and our stakeholders and our support personnel to be in tune with the people we're trying to serve. And candidly, we want to give them the confidence that, oh, I got something good done this week, or I got something good done these 2 weeks. You say, well, how's that happen? Well, are you able to forecast realistically and achieve your forecast over and over again? This is one of Russell's metrics for are people going to be happy in their work. A product vision is a written statement used to define and communicate the outcomes customers need from a product or a service. So it needs to be written so it's harder to misunderstand. I could draw you a picture, but if it's a large enough picture, are you looking at, say it's an animal. Are you looking at the feet or the hooves? Are you looking at the mouth? Are you looking at the eyes? You're looking at the ears? You're looking at the body? You're looking at the tail? But a written statement is, which we're using here, is our ability to try our best to convey to you in a language you both understand the outcomes we want a customer to have. It can identify how the outcome needs will be met. And I don't mean like technically how we'll meet them, but what could we do that would change the outcomes that they receive? Or it could be some opportunities that we want them to be able to take advantage of that they might not be aware of or might not be taking advantage of today. And it can differentiate the future state from the current state. So you're asking me, a huge checkbook, you're asking me to fund some product development effort. Well, what I want to know is, yeah, who's it for? I care about that. And I don't care about other things, but I also care about how is the world going to be different? If I write a big check and we develop this and we deliver it in a time that our customers are happy with, are they interested in using the thing? And if so, why? And how will their life be different? And I might be willing to write a bigger check for the impact I think that thing's going to make on their lives. So I'll invite you in your own mind, variation on a previous question. Think about something that was developed and one or multiple big checks were written to develop something, but there wasn't sufficient interest in the world to make the thing commercially viable. Think of products that have been released and then have a very short shelf life because there weren't enough people who would buy or were motivated enough to buy. So these are things we care about. That's where vision can help, and that's where you can help. So when do we create a vision? I alluded to this a minute ago. I create or lead in the creation of the product vision before product development is decided. Before somebody's written a check, I work to figure out, here's what we've got going on now. Here's what I want us to have in the future. And I'll give more details, but this is how do we start? This is your first steps. And candidly, if you want to teach others, this is their first steps. This is going to be simple. I might help create a vision before it's funded. I These two things happen before product development begins. I might do it as soon as product development begins if I'm late to the party, so to speak, or when I'm assigned to the product. The vision needs to be constantly revisited. And this is a big deal that you might not have heard other places. I'm just telling you right now. Would you rather release something that's a failure, that costs a lot of money, and we spend a lot of advertising, we put it in a lot of places, make it available to a lot of people, have a talk about it, and then it fails? Wouldn't you rather somebody before that say, I know we've spent all this money, but this is going to fail, and here's why it's going to fail? It'd be better if we didn't tell the whole world about it and we go back to the drawing board. By the way, if it fails, we're still going to go back to the drawing board. We may not do the same thing, but we're still going to do something different. So the idea that we've spent so much time on it is not a good reason to push something into production. Now you say to yourself, well, what's the motivation for pushing something into production? Think about it. Well, do you think it's on somebody's in somebody's review system that they're going to get a bonus if this thing sells so many units or so many licenses? Yeah, probably is. Is it in some sales or advertising leaders' goals? It is. And so if it doesn't get released, they can't achieve those goals. You think, gosh, that's sort of sorry. Well, they're hoping that I'll be wrong, or that they're hoping that you can imagine what they might hope for. I'm not saying they're the villains. I'm just saying that there's a lot of gears in motion that progress these things through an organization. And I'm not casting stones at anybody. I mentioned sales, I mentioned advertising. I'm not knocking them. Lots of other stakeholders want these things to go forward. And candidly, it's not because they think they're going to fail. They're inspired, and that's what the vision can help do. So it does need to be changed as needed, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the vision identifies the problem we're trying to solve, or identifies the opportunity we wish to pursue. So it can be a problem, or it can be an opportunity, or it can be both. The vision can provide a guiding light to stakeholders, so we can align our understanding, so that Bob doesn't think he's working on X and Sally doesn't think she's working on Y. And you say, gosh, Russell, that's dumb. Everybody knows what they're working on. No, everybody doesn't know what we're working on. Well, the leaders all know what we're working on. No, the leaders don't all know what we're working on. Are they incompetent? No, it's not that. It's some of them haven't gone through this process so they can seek alignment. Andrea says she needs Q, and Leonardo says he needs Alpha, and forget the fact that one is in English and one is Greek. But they align their understanding by working, in my case, with them to collaborate on a product vision. So they have agreement. And with agreement, then they're in a position where they can explain it to others. So without agreement, you get one person talking about alpha, another person talking about Q, I said a minute ago, or whatever. And we don't have alignment because we don't have a shared understanding. They both may be great ideas, but we want a common understanding of the challenge. It's often useful to provide descriptions of the current state and describe how the future state will be different. And what you don't want to do is start with a blank document. So I'm going to help fix that for you. So here's a template for a vision initial draft. And if I'll let you read down from the top yourself. So what we care about here is who's the target audience. And notice that's a pretty short line there. So we're trying to be, what's it say here? I know what it says. Start small and simple. So we're trying to pick a user, and on the second sheet of this, you can provide more detail about the user if you want, but we're not going to provide 6,000 details about the user here. We're talking about some first glance, who would be served by this. What do they want? That's a good question. Those of you who have, I made my living as a business analyst years ago, and sometimes people want something, and sometimes people need something, and they're not always the same thing. So, and assuming that person is a buyer, what we need to do is sell things to people that they're willing to buy, but they also meet their needs. And if you want to host me in for a lunch and learn, I'll be happy to help you a little bit in that direction. And then what will they use? So we don't want them to buy something and not use it. But we might have to steer them a bit in understanding what their real needs are so that they use it, right? Which of these can be wrong? None of those can be wrong. If they're going to buy it, it needs to meet needs they think they have. It needs to meet their real needs, and we want them to be able to use it once the purchase has concluded. And again, if this is not commercial facing, just use your own imagination. You've got a downstream stakeholder in your organization. What do they want? Right, this is a business analysis question. And what do they need? So now you have people in your organization who we want to be, choosing the right word here. They need to be in a place where they can explain to those stakeholders, have conversations with them about what they want and what they need, so that they realize that you want to meet their needs and enough of what they want so they can get the value from what you've done or do the work that they need to do with what you've done. The same is true for those who are supporting, those of you who are helping to build solutions. You say, who's supporting? Anybody that you need to do your work while you're doing the work. I'm just calling that a support person. They may not be a support person, but somebody you have to call and say, can you do X, Y, Z? Or somebody calls you and says, I need you to do X, Y, Z. And that's collaboration we talk about on our resumes sometime. But what we don't want to do is have, and I'm mixing my metaphor, but I guess I'm doing it on purpose. What we don't want is for the pit stop to take 25 minutes. That's not what we want. What we want is to be racing. And I don't mean we should be on the verge of a crisis all the time, but we want to be racing. And when it's time to replace the tires, we want that to be fast. Fast, yeah, you can look up fastest Formula One pit stop if you want. And that's what we want. We want an organization that's geared toward getting things done. Ken Schwaber, and I'm paraphrasing him, and he said the purpose of Scrum is, I'm paraphrasing, to get stuff done. So it's great that we have events, and it's great that we have names on characters, and that's all good stuff. But in the end, we want to get stuff done. And if you are in a position where you're helping your leaders get stuff done, or getting stuff done for your leaders, then you're going to be more and more valuable to your organization, which is something I desire for you. I've got two columns here, and the question is, what problems or opportunities will we address? So we got a column that's titled current problem or opportunity. And so I suggest you put one or two entries in there at most. Gosh, one or two, that's awful short, right? Succinct. Let's start small, and let's be clear about things that you think are big gains. And we can, can you add to it? Later. When can you revise it? Later. This is not a once and done. This is, let's get started. I've done this just like this with leaders who did not have agreement on what they were going to do. Wonderful people that I love dearly. And then the question is, for each item on the left, how will the solution be different from the current state? So great, something's going to be different. And what's going to be different would be a good question. Again, limit one or two to start. So if there's a current problem and you have 6 solutions for it, just pick one or two. You can add to it later. What we don't want is to give somebody this book that it took me 3 times to read because it was a lot of material that was sophisticated. Sophisticated, I don't know. Hard for me to understand at the time, or maybe required a lot of patience on my part, but that's not you, that's me. So let's look at an initial draft of this. So we might consider a challenge here, and so there's a point. There's a point to this. So if you be patient, um, we might have a target audience of those people who use hymnals or songbooks. You say, who cares about that? Well, just bear in mind. So one problem might be that my bookmarks keep falling out of my songbook. So I want to mark this page because I'm leading singing or I'm in a choir, and I stick a bookmark in there, and then maybe I have two bookmarks in there, and I open the hymnal up, and one of them falls out. So we want something different. We want some kind of new bookmark that won't fall out. That sounds pretty straightforward. The ones that won't fall out today are hard to insert and remove. I use paper clips as an example. Paper clips are awesome. You know, you stick it in there, and ta-da, it's in there. It's not coming out. But when you want to remove it, you know, there's a little dragging, and they get the little sharp points, and like they can tear at the paper a little bit, and then over time you got to get a new songbook. So what we want is a new bookmark that'll be easy to insert and remove. Notice we haven't identified our solution yet. These are outcomes. My bookmark falls out. The one I use today, hard to insert and remove. These are challenges. We want a new bookmark that won't fall out and one that will be easier to insert and remove. And we'll come back to the end for elaboration on this. So great, who creates the vision? What I've done and what I suggest you consider doing, we only have a user, and we only have like two things that are problems and two things that are potential solutions. And you think, gosh, what are you going to do with that? You know, if you sit down at the table and somebody has to come clear it off and then put a tablecloth down and then put plates down and then put cutlery down and et cetera, you feel like
Hey,
you're...
Russell. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. Your mic is fine right now, but sometimes it does go down. So if you want to switch to a headset, that might be a good thing to do.
I'm going to make one adjustment. If you'll monitor me for the next 30 seconds, let me know, okay?
Okay. Sorry, audience.
No, sometimes I fade from the mic. And just speak up again and I'll change to the earpiece,
Okay.
please. Yeah. So who creates it? You and the key stakeholder, you and a close colleague. Great. We've got some initial product vision that might look like that. Great. What do you do then? Well, you might expand your circle of feedback. So you might get information from others. Can you get feedback from those who can correct some of the initial thoughts? Great. We get feedback from those people. Then get feedback from some others. We need some kind of initial agreement among some stakeholders to begin using the document. We don't just need to roll in and say, I've done this all by myself and this is what we're going to do. I guess you can do that if you own the company, you can do whatever you want. But we do need some agreement among stakeholders. How's this sounding, Lindsay?
Better.
Okay, thank you. What we want to do is seek brevity and purity. Long is not the best here. And we'll get to how to create alignment and how to keep it realistic in just a moment. Long's not the best. We want to motivate and inspire people. So the people I suggested that need to understand the product vision back here is, when do you create it? Who will use it? There we go. These are people it matters to. So those people need something that they can understand, because if they can't understand it, it's not going to be valuable to them. And this is not a user story map. So you can use your search engine if you don't already create user story maps. They're awesome, by the way. And it's not a product backlog. This is not a list of all the things that we might do. Great, we've got initial vision. We can get assistance from others on developing it. Great, what do we do now? Well, we show it to those who are on the project, the product development effort. And notice I'm intentionally being repetitive here. And we show it to those in the project. and we show it over and over again. So you might think, why would we show it to them over and over again? Well, think of a sporting event, or think of a musical performance, or think of a theatrical performance. And these things have coaches, and those coaches repeat things, and they repeat them over and over again, so that sometimes they need to be repeated just so they're remembered, and other times they need to be repeated as an emphasis that we need to do this, or candidly, I guess sometimes not do this. We want the project team, the leaders, and the stakeholders to understand all this as well. Now, well, why? Well, sometimes it needs to change. So if somebody has this great idea, we're going to spend a lot of money, we're going to do this thing, and it's going to take a lot of, what I haven't mentioned yet is physical energy and emotional energy. I mentioned dollars, but if you're going to work for 2 years on something, you want it to be on something that will be successful. So you might think to yourself, have you known anybody that worked for a year or two on something that was never released? I have known people who did that, and how demoralizing that would be, how discouraging that would be, because the next project you're on, if you're not a program leader or product manager or product owner, you may wonder, is this going to flop also? And if you've been on those projects, you understand what a drag that can be. What if the vision needs to be revised? What if we need to clarify who the user is? Or if they have a problem we didn't earlier, couldn't conceive before? What if work needs to stop for a while? What if we discovered we need to do something that we had not planned on doing because they have a need that we didn't understand earlier? Or what if we need to stop forever? This is before something goes into production. What if we need to say, let's stop? So some of you may use your search engine and type in Palm, I think it was Pre. They had a handset that they tried to sell for a while and wasn't successful. Some of you also know that Microsoft had a Windows phone for a while. That wasn't successful. Were they bad ideas? I'm not saying they're bad ideas, but there's a lot of reasons things can't succeed, and it's not necessarily all on the side of the product features. So how do we know if we need to change the vision? Well, I suggest you show the vision at the beginning of all your events. So if you're leading an event, have that at the very beginning. Candidly, you might not speak to it. It's on the screen there. So when the meeting begins, some people have looked at it, and if you need to repeat it quickly, part of it, you can do that. Or if you want to put it at the end of one of your meetings, so that it's, what we want to do is reinforce this to people. And you might share it, have the host share the vision at the beginning of all the events that we host, if they're online, or even if we use a computer in any of the events. We do want input from others on the vision. So you
Hi,
might
Russell. Sorry to interrupt again. I think you should switch to a headset.
Sure.
Sorry. And to our listeners that are on here, audience, keep the questions coming. We got a nice list of questions here.
Can you hear me on this?
Yes. Beautiful.
This was like $35, so I'm just kidding. It's a good investment. We want input from others because there may be people who are new to the product development effort who we didn't get input from in the past. And new persons have new training, have new experiences, have new visions of the world, have new working experience on other products, and they might suggest some of it might need to change. And we don't have to do it in a meeting with them, but we can meet separately with them and get their input. Do we need to add things to it? And this is the same question you ask about a product backlog. This isn't a product backlog, but the same thing we'd ask about a product backlog during a sprint review. So if you're not doing that, holler at me, come to one of my training classes, invite me in as a coach, and I'll be happy to help you in that way. The next to last bullet here is there another use for the product or service that we had not considered before? So if you do a search by the sticky note story, there was a fella who worked for a company, and some of you know this, named 3M, and he had the need back here. He had this need. He wanted to keep track of a spot in his hymnal, and he wanted to keep track in a way where the bookmarks wouldn't fall out and where they were easy to insert and remove. So this guy worked for 3M, and some of you, I'll ask you to use your imagination. Guess what he ended up using for this? Okay, I'm going to give you a hint. What's it look like? So he was working for 3M, and the shortest story is they began using these sticky notes to mark his pages in the hymnal. And in this drawer over here, I have about 25 different kinds of stickies, different sizes, lined and unlined, vertical and horizontal, different colors. I've got some super sticky stickies, and these are additional needs that different people have for the same product. And what we want to do is understand that it's not enough that was right enough. I'm using that phrase on purpose. That was right enough once. We want it to be righter and righter as the days progress. And this is true even after product development. Great. We've got a product in production that's successful. Are we done? Or is there somebody else who might want to use this? Please bear this last thought in mind, is that the assumptions we make about what our customers want, which I've indicated here, those assumptions get proven to be true or proven to be untrue by our customers or our downstream stakeholders. So we can't simply decide it's going to be true if it's something that's sold commercially. And we can't simply decide that something we send downstream to our stakeholders is going to be successful. We need input and feedback from them and from other stakeholders to understand if what we're doing is adequate. And you say, gosh, is that really true? Yeah, just imagine a manufacturing environment where you're creating a part and that combines with other parts and those combine with other parts. So the people downstream need to understand, believe that the parts you're creating are meeting their needs. Lindsay, I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. So we have a bunch here. So we'll start at the top. So who should participate in the formulation of the vision?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I'll give simple answers first. So if somebody wants to talk to me, in a lunch and learn, or message me or something, I want to initially start with you or you and your colleague to create your best understanding. Wrong is fine. And then what I would want to do is look up the chain of interest in the product, right? If it's something for an internal organization, something developed in an organization, who has an opinion about what should be in that? Who, a sponsor, somebody who controls the pocketbook, somebody who's a leader in the development effort. So it's those people you want input from, not at the same time. Talk to what you don't want is a big arguing session among stakeholders who are all right. And I don't mean sarcastically they're all right. They all have different perspectives. So in my experience, I've gotten advice from, bear with me, from, all the way up to director level. I don't think it was VP level, but you get the idea. All the way up to that high, maybe senior director level. I don't remember the positions, but that's a longer answer that I meant to give, Lindsay.
Great, thank you. I hope that helps. So next question here, should the target audience be a human? For example, can the target audience be investment funds or should it be the investors of those funds?
Let me think about that. Would you repeat the question again so it etches into my gray matter?
Sure. So should the target audience be a human? For example, can the target audience be investment funds or should it be the investors of those funds?
Well, the follow-up I'd like to ask, and if we can ask it and get feedback, then I'll be happy to answer it better. I'm looking to know what our goal, just to be clear, about what our goal is and what happiness looks like. So if I understand those two things, then if someone can put that in, that'd be great. And I can come back to that
Okay,
one.
Michael, if you're still in here, can you please put that feedback in the chat? That would be helpful. And then we can revisit that question. All right. So next question. Also about a target audience. Naturally, you'll always have a target audience. Is it okay not to have one until the product is built and then it materializes?
Here's what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing is we don't know who will buy the hula hoop, but I'm just using that as an example. But we think it's awesome. We don't know who will buy it, but it's worth our investment because we know some people are going to buy it, and it's awesome. Yeah, that's fine. I would like, if I'm writing a check, I'd like to know some people that I think are going to buy it. That's what I'd like to have. So I don't just, I mean, if it's electricity, that's a little bit easier to see who's going to use this. And I use that because it's part of Steve Jobs quote from the past. But yeah, it's okay not to know, but somebody needs, how do you know if it's successful or not? I guess you can measure it by sales, but eventually you need to figure out who's trying to buy the thing. And if that's an insufficient answer, hit me back again.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I guess this was more directed when you were talking about defining a problem. What if there's no problem? You're simply making life easier.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, what I would care about, if I go back to that slide with no input yet, I care about what's the, oops, accident. I care about what opportunity exists, and if they capitalize on that opportunity, how will their world be different? And I don't mean their world, how would their life be different? Candidly, will they be happier? Will they sleep better? Will they have less stress? Will they have a more relaxing lunch? I'm talking about people at work, but if it's outside of work, then are they going to show it to their friends? Did they put a smile on their face? Those are the things I care about. I want to know basically what the end result is going to look like in their head and their heart and maybe their pocketbook if it's going to save them money.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you. What kind of good collaborative techniques do you recommend to get to a vision?
The collaborative techniques I have used in the past, among others, is myself. I'll work on something by myself, then I'll get a colleague together and we'll have a whiteboard and we'll talk. And if we're not together, we'll have Mural or Miro or Klaxoon or some kind of an interactive tool. And we'll hash out some challenges and consider who the users are. And somebody needs, candidly, if you want a third person in there to take a bunch of notes, that's great. But so what I've used, and I'll do the same thing with each additional person, is a lot of discussion. Now, what you can do, candidly, is you can write down of the potential problems or opportunities, which of these do we think they're willing to pay to solve? Or which of these do we think, if it's an internal challenge, which of these do we think leadership would want this person to solve? It's great. Here's a good idea. Are you going to use it? Well, it depends on whether my leader thinks it's a good idea or not. So a bit of what will they use, or what will their leader want them to use, or what will they buy, are good questions to ask about the opportunity. Another good question to ask, you didn't ask about questions, but how to do it, is if we're trying to buy people away from another product or service, then what's it going to take to buy them away? So interviews, using visuals, recording them is great. Somebody acting as a scribe is great. There are some facilitation techniques. The one that I like the most is where you expect, and this is pretty tremendous. You should expect, big deal, you should expect people to go off in 6 different directions while you're talking to them. I mean, even if you're talking to one person, they'll have this idea here, and this idea here, and this idea here, and this idea here. And you say, gosh, isn't that terrible? Yeah, I thought it was awful for years. I thought it was just terrible. And then what I came to learn was that the varied ideas are an appropriate part of the discovery process. And so what we need to do is identify those ideas in one of these visual tools or on a whiteboard, and then hone in on the ones that you think might drive you toward the solution. So we list them and they're visible. We don't say shut up, that's not relevant. We list them, and then we try to hone in on the ones that we think are most salient for the moment. And then what about the rest? Do we erase them? No, we keep them. And then we can hone back in on them later as needed.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving right along here, you mentioned that people get invested emotionally in a project or a product. So if in the end it is not successful, that can be frustrating. From your experience, how do you prevent team members and stakeholders to resist adapting the product vision, as this might mean a lost investment in the previous vision?
Read the last two sentences again.
So from your experience, how do you prevent team members and stakeholders to resist adapting the product vision, as this might mean a lost investment in the previous vision?
Oh, you mean how do you keep them from revising it?
I think so. That's
Yeah. What we want to keep a keen focus on, and I guess let me make this emphasis here, is we care about the people who are going to be using our solution. If there's anybody besides you, and in all these cases I'm thinking about somebody besides you who's going to be using it, we want to have our focus on them and their needs, which is a different part. That's product ownership and product management. And so what we don't want to do is we want people to change it if we better understand the user's needs. But if people are trying to change it just so they can get something into production for whatever reason they want to get it, and I'm not saying it's a bad reason, but we don't want that. We want somebody to, candidly, if I'm alone with them, then I'll say, and being alone with somebody is good to try to get some of these out, is like, help me understand what's going to be different if we do that. How's this, just let me know. I want to know more, which you should want to know more. And if they don't have a good answer for that, then, if you're friends with them or want to be friends with them or don't care, you say, let's wait until can we get clear on that? Let's get clear on that before we change this. And that's a way, if you get the feeling, the sense that what they're suggesting is wrong, you say, how would you have that sense? Well, you may have talked to 16 other people about the vision. And yes, they may say we're in a heliocentric universe, and they may be right, but let's not just run off the telescope before we understand that solution a little bit better, or that postulation better.
okay. Thank you. All right. So Michael got back to us with more context from his question earlier. So should the target audience be a human? For example, can the target audience be investment funds, or should it be investors of those funds? Michael added, the goal is to create a vision statement. If someone thinks the target audience is the investment funds, how do you get input from the funds? You cannot. You need to target an actual person so you can get input and agreement.
Yeah, what I would do, and I spent years as a business analyst, so I have some experience doing these things. That doesn't mean all my answers are right. But what we want to try to figure out is, before talking to them, is what do we think they value? This is what they want, right? What do they want? And then what do they need? And we want to care about how those things are different. And so what we want to understand is, if we want to buy an investment fund and sell it to somebody else, and my terms are wrong, so just be patient with me about the terms. If we want to make something available to someone and see if they're going to pursue it, then I think you could ask them questions independent of that fund and just say, look, we're trying to meet your needs better. If there's some people you can talk to, and try to understand their needs and desires better. And then the pivotal question that I haven't mentioned so far is, once we get something in production, how do we validate that the value is actually being received? Because we can release something awesome, but we want to figure out how we know that it's successful. So if this fund is very profitable, but the person doesn't want to hold it or doesn't want to buy it, that's a different kind of challenge. But hopefully the people we're selling it to can see the results later if they've bought it. And then even if they were not sure at first, they can be happier later.
Okay, I hope that helps. All right, so next question. How do you compare your approach to things like a business model canvas?
Yeah, I think this is baby's first steps. I didn't really want to say that phrase because we're not babies, but this is how do we begin by understanding somebody that might have some need. And if you look at a business model canvas, the advice that I've seen on many of them is start with one or two, maybe no more than three things. So we're trying to start with three things a customer might want or desire and how we might solve them. And so when I coach and train and execute, especially with training, I want people to focus on, even if it's good for 17 customers, I want them to focus on one customer and what are their big problems, or else if we can't solve one person's problems or two person's problems, I guess one person's problems, then it's hard for us to think that we're going to succeed in other ways. So if I find a guy who's very successful in one area, then we may say, well, maybe this guy can be successful in some other areas because he had success there. So that's the short answer.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this next one here, is there any value in creating a vision statement for a product that has already been created and is now in maintenance and sustaining mode?
Yes. Yes. There's a very great, if it doesn't exist now, what I care about is, and I'm going to be sort of whimsical here, is, how fast do we have to fix this, and who's the person that we care about, and what happens if we don't fix this thing, and what's the, I'm not talking about support response time. I'm just talking candidly, I'd like to go to work and think that when I left, I made some human being happy. And doesn't have to be that way, won't necessarily be that way. But the guy who was working on the church had the vision that there's going to be people in here and they're going to be worshiping, and that he was looking forward to somebody who would get results. And this would be the same if you were working on Henry Ford's auto plant in years past. Is, yeah, I'm just working on this wheel tire assembly, etc. But somebody's going to be using this and they're going to be driving their kid to the doctor, or they're going to be driving to their grandmother's house, or they're going to be delivering fruit, all the way down the line. So that's a short answer to, I want to come home and think I've made somebody happy by something I've done, period.
Okay, so there's another question here that kind of builds on that. So recommendations on how to create that product vision for the existing product. And then does that then lead to a roadmap?
Yeah, if it doesn't already exist, then I would go back up the chain to the people who had some of the involvement with the development, or maybe start at the top of the chain, which is, why did we fund this thing? Or why did you fund this thing? To try to peel back to get to a vision that makes sense. And then once you have a vision that you think, here's the deal. The visions are never right, but through a process of continual making it clear to people, call that transparency, and repeated inspection, then we can make adaptations. So it's never right, but you want it as right as possible. And then once it's as right as possible, then you figure out for future changes, how is this going to affect the person that has these needs? And are we going to steer off track? Are we going to be in line with what their desires are?
Awesome, thank you. All right, another one here. If the vision undergoes multiple revisions throughout the project's life cycle, how can one ascertain whether the envisioned outcomes have been realized or delivered?
No, that's good. So ideally, what I would suggest in coaching or training, and you can look me up, and I'd love to teach you or coach you or your team. But what we care about how do we know this is great? Bob has this need because he doesn't want, his name wasn't Bob, but doesn't want these bookmarks to fall out. And then the question is, how do we know that this satisfies his need? Well, candidly, would he buy them? And does he continue to buy them? And so that's one measure, which is, would he buy them? But there are other measures that we can use to try to figure out whether we're continuing to deliver value or delivering more value. And so those are the measures. measures we need to get our handle on to decide which things we care about, period.
Okay, thank you. This next one, is it good to use an elevator pitch to write down the vision statement?
It can be. It can be good. It's great if you have a short conversation with somebody and you say, I'm XYZ and we're trying to serve Bob and Bob has these needs and we're going to do this for Bob. Fine way to say it. We still need to go this other version periodically. Elevator pitch is sort of hard to refine over and over again with stakeholders, but I want to know what their problems are, what their outcomes, challenges they have now, and how we're going to fix them. So long answer, yes.
Okay. And then how do you get leaders to buy into having a vision? I've struggled to get them to understand the value of our business, the value for our business.
Yeah, but it depends on the resistance. I'm not saying take up the pitchforks. I'm saying let's create one locally. We don't have to spend millions of dollars. We don't have to spend thousands of dollars. Let's create one locally, and great, show that at the beginning of some of your events to align the people who are going to be doing the work, and then if the person's observing these things, they should candidly. If it's me, I find somebody who would benefit from the thing, and I would tell them, look, I'm not sure everybody appreciates how useful this is. If you would say something in this next event where Andrea's there, I'm sorry for all the beeping, then that would reinforce to that leader that there are people who are benefiting from this thing. Because you don't want to just argue with a leader all the time. You want other people to come in. This is what I've done in my other organization in times past, is I've had people chime in during sprint reviews when other leaders are there, people that they cared about. It wasn't just a guy, who's the temporary phone repair guy. It's somebody that they cared about was saying this is really valuable. And so what you don't want is them just arguing, I don't know, with you. You want them to realize other people are being served by that as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think we have time for maybe one more. How can we connect the vision to the product goal?
I'm thinking. Still thinking. So when I think product goals, I think intermediary goals. So the product goal is a component of serving the larger product vision. So it can be in two ways. Imagine if the vision can be served in, say, two ways. And great, we serve part of one of those ways with this product goal and the other way with this other product goal, so they're separate. But in the case of online software, is there non-online software? Yeah, I guess you can be offline, but there are certain things that I can have need of, and those things can filter into the application over time. And what we care about, if I want something to be, I don't know, super fast, then we want the new things to be super fast also. And you say, gosh, can I recognize that? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But we want to meet those needs. And part of that is understanding your customers and how they value their experiences and what they want. So that's a way they can be associated.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So we are at our time. We had a couple open questions. I will connect them with you, Russell, so we can get those addressed. But we did get through most of them. Thank you so much, Russell, for your time today. It seems like the audience really found this valuable. Audience, thank you so much for attending. Please, continue to attend these. I hope to see you all soon, and I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Russell, and Scrum on. Take care.